Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Erdley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan. I'm your host, Catherine Erdley, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club, which is my membership group for product businesses. You can find out more at resilientretailclub.com. And if you use the code 10podcast, that's 10podcast, you can get £10 off your first month. Today's episode is called 5 Ways to Avoid Your Product Business Becoming a Burden. And I decided that I wanted to put this episode together because I know that it has been a tough year. I've mentioned this several times before on the podcast. I know we've talked about it with lots of different people, and I know a lot of you are very much aware of this. But it has been a particularly challenging year, I think, for small businesses because of the fact that this is now our 3rd year of very challenging years, and a lot of people are tired. A lot of people are finding it really hard to motivate themselves. And in the sort of summer lull, I know a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed. So I thought it would be a timely episode to talk about ways that you can work with your business to make sure that it is something that is sustainable. And by sustainable, I mean something that you can keep on doing. And I think it's very important to consider this as business owners, because ultimately, if we can't keep going with our businesses, if we're running them in a way that is not allowing us a work-life balance, isn't allowing us joy, freedom, then it can actually be very hard to keep it going, and most people will just simply run out of steam. So in my mind, creating a sustainable business is really about looking at the ways in which you can avoid your business becoming a burden. So in terms of the 5 different points that I'd like to make, there's probably so much more here, but I wanted to kind of start with some of the most common conversations that I end up having with people. I work with businesses, of course, both in the Resilient Retail Club, in the membership group, where I hear from members every single day when I'm in there checking, seeing what people are talking about, and in our Ask Me Anything sessions, for example, where people can share their questions. But also I work as a mentor for product businesses, as well as doing business audits and other one-off pieces of work. And so really in that respect, I talk a lot to different product business owners, and I wanted to capture some of the themes that I find coming up most often when I'm talking to people, especially people who are struggling. So the first point that I'd like to make, the first way to make your business feel less like a burden, is to have good boundaries. So this is something that I've worked on a lot in my own business, and I definitely wouldn't say I get it right all the time. But it's really about boundaries, putting them in place, because it can feel completely overwhelming and it can feel completely consuming when you've got a product business and you feel like you have to respond to everything all the time. And I know lots of people talk to me about the fact that they're answering customer service questions late at night. They feel like they have to have this instant response, and they feel like they just have to be on all the time and available all of the time. And that can be one of the things that really eats into their enjoyment of the business. So in terms of setting boundaries, you may want to decide, for example, you're not available at weekends, or maybe you're not available after 6 p.m, or maybe you're only available Monday to Thursday and Friday you're off. Whatever that looks like for you, think about having clear boundaries. And think about how you can communicate those with your customers, because arguably you can have whatever boundaries that you like to have as long as you're telling your customers what those are. One of the best ways to do that is to have autoresponders set up for your email. I'd also argue that if you're somebody who has got one email address that everything goes to, so it could be your personal email address, for example, but it's also the customer service email address. You may want to consider splitting that so that you've got 2 different email addresses, one for customers and one for everything else. It's one of the things that I often end up suggesting to people who have grown and the business is growing and it's becoming more than just them as a single founder, or maybe they're not even quite at that stage yet, but they're finding it really overwhelming because they're finding all of this communication from their customers is quite exhausting and taking up all of their time and effort and energy. So if you can direct people to one email address, preferably, as I said, having a separate one for customer services, then you start to create a little bit of a boundary in terms of when you're getting these messages. You can also ask people on Instagram, for example. Quite a lot of businesses you'll see will say, please don't DM for customer service, please send an email to customer help at blah, blah, blah. And I think that that's legitimate too. You don't have to be available via Instagram if you don't want to be. Once you've got an email set up, or even if you're still using one email, it's a great idea to have an autoresponder that just goes out, that explains clearly when the inbox is being monitored. So, for example, you may say that this inbox is monitored Monday to Friday between 9 and 5 p.m. Any queries will be answered once we're back in the office, something like that. Something that gives you permission to then say, actually, I'm not going to be available at all times to answer. It could also be something that says things like, thanks so much for your email. If you've got a question about where your order is, please don't forget to check the tracking information that you would receive with your order confirmation. Or maybe it directs them to some FAQs. There's lots of things that you can put into your email, your autoresponder email, that means that you know that you're answering most commonly asked questions, but you're also setting expectations as to when those might be answered. You may, depending on the type of business that you have, wish to have something like, almost like a burner phone, some kind of phone number or something that you know is only going to get calls if it's an urgent customer service query. That means that everybody else will get an email back sent to them saying that you will respond to most queries within 24 hours or longer if it's the weekends. 1 working day, for example. And therefore, you know that if it's super urgent, they can call you, but otherwise it's going to be dealt with in a timely fashion. And a lot of people find that having these boundaries, it just helps the business feel less like you're always on. And the truth is that a lot of big businesses are just not available at the weekends. Even, for example, I had a situation recently where I needed to call a medical company and they just don't have any support on the weekends. That's just not something that's available. So you have to call back on Monday. So a lot of these big businesses, they only work in office hours. There's nothing wrong with you saying that you will too. I know some people feel like they pride themselves on their responsiveness to their customers. They love the fact that it's them personally responding to customers, and they feel that that really helps the customers as well. And that's perfectly valid to feel like that. But if you are feeling overwhelmed and stressed and like your attention is always being pulled in all different directions because you're trying to stay on top of messages that you've been sent and other things like that, then it's worth thinking at this point about getting yourself some autoresponders, some good boundaries put into place, some information on your website that explains clearly when you're going to be available, and to stop feeling like you have to be constantly available all the time for customers, because ultimately there's very few situations in a product business where it is life or death. So you being able to step away for a bit and to gather your thoughts and to have a bit of space is really important. Okay, so point number 2, when it comes to stopping your product business becoming a burden, finances. This is really about realistic expectations about the amount of money that your business will generate. And one of the reasons that I find a lot of the time people are very, very stressed out about their product businesses is that they've perhaps placed too much pressure on the business on a too early a point to become a major source of income. And perhaps this isn't the most popular thing to say, but in my experience and from talking to a lot of different people who run product businesses, especially in your first year, the chances of you being able to take a salary and to be able to take a kind of salary that can support yourself from your product business is less common. Most people's experience is that it's a slow start, that it's something that builds up gradually over time. And one of the main sources of stress that I talk to people about in their business is when they've put too much pressure on it too soon in order to generate the amount of money that they need. And I've talked about this before in previous episodes about this whole idea that the ultimate goal with your business is to be able to support yourself, to be able to make it your full-time employment. And there's a lot of pressure, I think, on business owners who feel like this is something that I have to do and I have to do it right away. And if I'm not doing it, then somehow I'm a failure. When the truth is that one of the most important ingredients when it comes to success in business is actually time. It's showing up, it's being there, it's attracting the right customer to you, it's figuring out who you are, what you want to sell, all of those things, all of which take time. So if you're trying to rush it and you're trying to put too much pressure on the business right from the get-go in order for you to start supporting yourself, then it will feel a lot more stressful than if you've allowed it to really evolve organically. So I would say for most people, it's actually much better and easier if there are other sources of income coming in at the same time as you building your business. And if you do want to move to being full-time in your business, that it's something that you can do gradually. Of course, that is very difficult from a time standpoint. That involves a lot of juggling. In terms of the financial element, it definitely feels less stressful. I think that also comes back to having realistic expectations. As I said, anybody who tells you that they can help you build your business to six figures in the next few months, I would be extremely skeptical about that. My experience is that not only do product businesses grow, not slowly, I would say that's not true at all, but they take time. They do take time to develop. It's unlikely to be in the first year that you're going to be turning over six figures, probably unlikely to be in your second year. I would say most people I know who have hit six figures or multiple six figures in their business, it's probably taken them 3 or 4 years. The other thing really to say as well is that if you are taking home around 25 to 30% of your revenue as your personal income from your business, then you're doing really well for product business. A lot of people that I speak to who run product businesses, they are not taking anywhere near that percentage home as their income. So I think that also helps you start to see, in terms of being realistic about the income generated by product businesses, you can start to see that if your turnover is not going to be six figures for maybe 3 years, who knows, then your income, if your income is going to be 25 to 30% of that, you can see that the likelihood of you being able to replace, for example, a professional level income from your product business, it's going to take time. It's certainly doable. I've certainly seen people who are able to pay themselves very healthily and are able to exceed what they would have earned previously in a professional role. But for a lot of people, that takes longer, takes a lot of discipline, takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of slow sales growth that's done in a profitable way to allow you to keep taking that money out of the business. So I think, again, just being really realistic about how much pressure are you putting on yourself to support yourself financially from your business at this point in time. So point number 3, 5 ways to avoid your product business becoming a burden, is all really about your perspective and your mindset. This, I think, is something I've talked a lot on Instagram recently, but I think mindset is so crucial for your business. And I think one of the ways to avoid your business becoming a burden is to understand that one of your jobs as a business owner, possibly one of your most important jobs, is managing your mindset and is managing how you feel about your business. Nobody else is going to shout about your business like you are. Nobody else is going to champion yourself as much as you are. So you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your product. You have to believe in what you're doing in order for you to keep feeling positive and keep feeling optimistic and resilient about your business. I think one of the big things that really hits a lot of people is comparisonitis. I've talked to almost everybody I talk to one-to-one, probably at some point, the whole topic of comparisonitis has come up and how the impact that it's having on them when they think about their business. One of the things that happens is that there's this, what you might call survivor's bias. So if you have been running your business, especially if you've been running it for 2 or 3 years, you may start looking around and seeing people who are still running their business at the same time as you and feeling like, oh, maybe I'm behind, or maybe they're doing better than me on this, that, or the other. But what you're not seeing is all the people who started their business but then didn't keep going. So in your mind, you're behind. Whereas in fact, if you looked at the wider population, you might actually be doing very well. So I think that being aware that being in a positive frame of mind, avoiding comparisonitis, being optimistic, staying in a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset is all part of your job as a business owner. And that can really help the way that you feel about your business, the way that you interact with your business, and it can help turn it from being something that can feel like a burden to being something that is really an adventure. And even if things don't work out the way that you want them to, you know that there's lots of different things that you can try and there's lots of ways that you can keep moving forward. What also falls into this category is celebrating your successes. Small business owners are terrible at celebrating their successes. It's one of the reasons that within the Resilient Retail Club, we have a weekly wins section where I encourage people to tell us what they achieved this week. And it's really fantastic to see what people are achieving each and every single week. But if you don't take the time to pat yourself on the back, you may just look back on the last month and think, oh, I haven't really done anything. But actually, you've probably done a huge amount. You've probably had some real wins. But if you're always looking for the next win or telling yourself it's not good enough or that so-and-so's done it better, then you're not going to get the benefit of celebrating those wins. And it's going to make your mindset tougher, which is going to make your business feel like a burden. So definitely working on your own perspective and your mindset can really help. One thing that I always notice is that if I ever am feeling too sort of overconsumed by the business or thinking about it too much, or just it feels too life or death for something that really isn't life or death, then I always like it when I go and have a chat with my friends I have many friends who don't run businesses. And it's just really refreshing sometimes to get out of that small business bubble. And also I realize often when I'm talking to friends that we could talk for hours and hours and hours and the whole subject of the business will never come up. So it just reminds me that as well as being a business owner, I'm also a mother and a friend and daughter and all of these other things that will still remain whether or not the business is successful or not successful. So it helps give that healthy dose of perspective and makes me remember that, yes, of course, we all want our businesses to do well, but when things maybe aren't working out quite the way that you want them to, it's always really good to remember that this is just part of life and there's so much more to it. And there, whole conversations, days, weeks can go by where you don't even mention it if you're with people who aren't also in that small business bubble. So it's always good to get that bit of perspective. Number 4, out of the 5 ways to avoid your product business becoming a burden, I got to put it in here, but knowing your key numbers. I think this is really important because in my experience, one of the things that makes people more uncomfortable than anything else is this feeling that they don't really know what's going on in their business. So I liken it to that point where you get to where you know that your finances aren't in great shape, but maybe you've stopped opening letters from the bank or you haven't checked your balance in a while or whatever else it is that means that you're just really putting your head in the sand as opposed to actually looking at the facts and figures. I think this happens in people's businesses maybe more often than they'd like to admit. Yes, you may have an accountant, and if you don't, definitely get yourself one. But really, the accountant shouldn't be the person telling you how the business is doing. You should be able to know yourself. And a lot of that is not knowing what expectations to set. So not having a sales forecast, for example, or a sales plan, not having a clear idea of what your targets are in terms of your profitability, not knowing what your profit margins are, or maybe having not checked them recently after this latest round of price increases, maybe not knowing how much stock you're holding, not knowing how much stock you're going to have to buy in the near future to do the sales that you want to do. All of those things, I think, really contribute to what I call in my upcoming book, that's coming out next February, Tame Your Tiger. It's one of those things that make people feel like they're living with a tiger. It's kind of unpredictable. You don't really know what you're doing. You feel like you should know, but you don't. And I think that taking some time to understand some of the key numbers in your business, so your top line sales, your bottom lines, what your bottom line is, what your fixed costs are per month and how they relate to your sales. So if you look at your fixed costs, how much do you have to sell in order to break even to cover those costs? What is your profit margin, your in margin when you're buying the products in? What is your out margin, so your final sales margin? All of those things, even just a few of those numbers can really help you feel much more in control and much more like you understand what's going on. And then the business becomes less unpredictable, less mysterious and cash hungry, and more about you understanding what the parameters are and being able to work around them. And then point number 5 is get some support. Don't be afraid to ask for help. So it is a real roller coaster. It is a real roller coaster ride. And while I do think it's wonderful to spend time with people who don't have businesses because it helps give you that perspective, I think it's actually also really wonderful and can be incredibly helpful to get support from other people around you also running their businesses. I really think that there's a deep human need to talk to other people who are going through the same thing that we're going through, whether that's having a new baby, whether that's having a new business, whether that is being a dog owner or whatever it is. Whatever your experience is, especially when you're new to something or especially when you're really working on improving something, then being around other people who've got similar experiences is absolutely crucial. I know myself and my own business, I'm part of 2 masterminds, which are really wonderful. And I have some fantastic small business friends that really help me enormously to bounce ideas off them and just talk things through and talk to people who understand me, understand what I'm doing, and I can really relate to. And that's what I really wanted to create with the Resilient Retail Club, is that idea of having a community, having people that you can talk to. We've got a private Facebook group, people post in there all kinds of things, from questions to wobbles to sharing their wins to all of these different things that really help them connect with other people who are also running product businesses. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Find your people, find the people who can relate to you, who can relate to what you're doing. I think it really honestly helps to have the people who you can just be completely honest with and just say, look, this is what's going on for me, what's going on for you, and to build those relationships. I think it's really important. And there's so much help out there. There's so much support out there. You definitely don't have to do this alone. And again, feeling unsupported is one of the major reasons a lot of people that I talk to are feeling like their business is a burden, because they feel isolated. Maybe they're used to working in a team. They're used to having office mates or people that they can bounce ideas off. And now they don't have that. They maybe don't know other people with businesses, or they just don't have people in their lives that they can bounce ideas off. Often as well, even if they do have a team, even if they have people working for them, they can feel awkward about how much do they want to share. Obviously, they want to bring their team into the business decisions and helping shape the future, but that not everybody is able, if they're managing a team, to really talk to their team about their concerns or fears or worries, because they don't really feel like they can be leaning on them. So having a network of peers, I think, is absolutely crucial for that. And really, for me, one of the major ways that you can make your business feel like what it should be, which is exciting and energizing and challenging, but really rewarding, as opposed to a burden. So there we go, my 5 top tips. Have a boundary, be realistic about the finances, get some perspective, work on your mindset, know your numbers, and ask for support. I'd love to know what you thought about today's episode. Why not come over to Instagram at Resilient Retail Club and let me know. Otherwise, if you listen in iTunes, you can rate and review the podcast, and I'm so deeply grateful to everyone who does so thank you. If you're listening in Spotify, you can always rate the podcast in the app. Otherwise, if you follow or subscribe, you'll be the first to know about every new episode. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions, or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.